All right, let's jump into today's deep dive. We're looking at a whole bunch of news headlines from India, all dated January 4th, 2025.
Oh, a real mix, I bet.
Yeah, we've got sports,
Fuzz.
politics,
Yeah.
some tech stuff, even a little health news.
Sounds like a good one.
Mhm.
It's always interesting, to see how these seemingly separate stories actually connect. Like they
Right.
reveal these underlying trends that are shaping the world.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're going to try and do today, try and connect those dots. Let's start with some geopolitics. Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, he's landing in India next week.
Interesting. What's the timing on that?
Well, it's right before the new U.S. president takes office.
Oh, I see.
And of course, there's that tension between India and China simmering away, especially with China's plans for that huge dam on that river that flows into India.
Right, right.
So you've got potential water disputes on the horizon, not to mention this U.S.-India initiative on critical and emerging technology.
CE.
ICE, yeah, for short. What is that exactly? Why is it such a big deal?
So basically, ICT, it aims to boost that strategic technology and defense cooperation between the U.S. and India. It's about bolstering India's capabilities, as a counterweight to China's growing influence.
So India's trying to walk this tightrope,
Yeah.
trying to strengthen those ties with the U.S. without pushing China away, especially with this new U.S. administration coming in.
Exactly. This visit, it could cause some pretty big ripple effects across the whole region. Think about it. What concessions might India be willing to make? And how will China react to this potential shift in the power dynamic? Some interesting questions there.
Definitely a lot to think about. Okay, let's switch gears to the world of tech and data in India. First up, Starlink, Elon Musk's satellite internet thing, hitting a snag in their India launch.
Oh, what happened?
Looks like they refused to give device ownership data to the Indian government. Stemmed from some drug bust, I think.
Mhm.
Starlink device was involved, and now authorities are a bit worried about potential misuse.
Oh, I see.
So you've got this push for expanded internet access, which, Starlink could provide. Yeah,
But it's clashing with India's stance on data security and control. Tough spot.
definitely. And it's not just a one-off thing either. India's new data protection rules, game changer. Platforms have to delete user data after just 3 years, with options for notification and retention.
3 years.
Yeah.
That's so different from what we see like in the EU or the US.
Big time. This could force global tech giants to completely change their data practices for the Indian market. How's it going to impact their business models, the whole landscape of data privacy? Something to think about. And then there's that issue with certain Garmin devices, the ones with satellite communication. They're straight up illegal in India.
Whoa, really? That's surprising.
Yeah.
Seems like India is drawing a very clear line. They're not just letting tech companies run the show, they're setting their own rules, even if it means delaying a major internet service or restricting certain devices.
Exactly. If we connect these seemingly unrelated dots, a clear picture emerges. India prioritizing data privacy, even at the potential cost of technological advancement. They're asserting their digital sovereignty, a bold move in this super interconnected world we live in. Speaking of complex situations, let's look at India's relationship with Bangladesh. Seems a bit heated at the border.
Tell me about it. Tensions have been escalating ever since that Bangladeshi official hinted that Bangladesh might need to annex parts of northeastern India,
Whoa.
citing the alleged mistreatment of Bengali-speaking Muslims in the region.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement.
Right.
And India's beefed up security at the border, right?
Oh, yeah. They're even building these new floating border outposts on the rivers. Bangladesh's new government's tried to backpedal, claiming they don't actually want to destabilize India, but the damage is done.
This situation just shows how intricate the relationship between these two countries is. They share a border, a history, but there are these deep divisions that remain.
It's true. The partition of India and Bangladesh's war for independence from Pakistan, it left lasting scars. Then you add issues of migration and the treatment of minorities, and it's a recipe for tension.
This latest flare-up, it really exposes how fragile their relationship is. The historical grievances, the current mistrust, it's like adding fuel to a fire.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that internal politics can spill over and impact international relations in a big way. What we're seeing here, it could have some serious consequences, not just for India and Bangladesh, but for the stability of the entire region.
For sure. It makes you think, what role could other countries play in de-escalating this? And how do you even begin to address the root causes of this tension? It's a situation worth keeping a close eye on. Let's shift gears for a second, away from the geopolitical drama to a potential health issue. the human metapneumovirus, HMPV. It's been in the news because of a surge in cases in China.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Fortunately, India's reporting no unusual surge in cases. They've got a pretty good surveillance system in place, and they're even upping HMPV testing as a precaution.
That's good to hear.
It is. But for those of us who don't know, what exactly is HMPV?
Well, it's a common respiratory virus.
Mm.
Usually causes mild cold-like symptoms, but it can be a bit more serious for young kids, older adults, and people with weaker immune systems.
So kind of like the flu in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. And just like the flu, there's no specific treatment for HMPV. It's all about managing the symptoms and preventing it from spreading through good hygiene practices.
Makes sense. It's good that India is taking this potential threat seriously and they've got a plan in place. Maybe other countries could learn a thing or two from India's approach, how they're monitoring and responding to these emerging health threats.
For sure. Preparedness and proactive measures are key when it comes to public health. Now, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, let's take a quick detour to the world of cricket. Can't talk about indie news without it, right? And there's some drama brewing, both on and off the field.
Always.
Captain Jasprit Bumrah, he's struggling with a back spasm right in the middle of that crucial test match against Australia.
Oof, back spasms are no joke.
No kidding. And Bumrah's been the leading wicket taker in this series.
Right.
His absence could really hurt India's chances of winning.
Yeah, especially with the Border Gavaskar trophy on the line. Speaking of pressure, veteran batsman and test skipper Rohit Sharma, he's been addressing those retirement rumors. He's had some critics lately about his form, but he's made it very clear he's not going anywhere.
You can hear that defiance in his statement. He's basically saying, critics won't dictate my career. I still got a lot to offer this team.
It takes guts to stand up to that kind of scrutiny, especially when every single move you make is analyzed under a microscope. You can really feel that passion for the game.
It's a reminder that even the most experienced athletes deal with doubt and criticism. But the real champions, they rise above the noise. They focus on their love for the game and their dedication to the team.
Powerful message. Okay, it's been quite a ride so far. International relations, tech regulations, a potential health threat, and even some cricket drama.
We've only just scratched the surface.
Back again for more of our deep dive into the news from India. Part 1, we covered everything. International relations, tech regulations, potential health issues, even a bit of that cricket controversy. Now let's see if we can go a little deeper, or maybe connect some of these seemingly random stories. What kind of connections have you noticed?
Well, one that stands out to me is the tension on that Bangladesh border and how it connects to the recent scaling back of visa operations in Bangladesh.
Right.
Thousands of Bangladeshi patients who rely on affordable treatment in India are impacted.
It's a real crisis for those patients.
And it happened after that ouster of a pro-India leader in Bangladesh.
Right. They're struggling to find other affordable healthcare options now.
This just shows a larger trend, the reliance on medical tourism. India, they've made themselves a global hub for affordable healthcare. But this situation shows just how vulnerable it is depending on another country for essential services.
It really highlights how these political shifts can have really real consequences for people's everyday lives, especially with something as basic as healthcare.
It raises some big questions, doesn't it? About the sustainability, the ethical implications of medical tourism. Should countries become so reliant on another one for their healthcare? What happens if those political relationships go bad? Tough questions with no easy answers. Definitely worth thinking about.
For sure. You also mentioned a connection to that H-1B visa program, the one mostly used by Indian tech professionals to work in the U.S. What's the link there?
It's kind of wild how that H-1B program keeps popping up in these global conversations. Remember how India emphasized the mutual benefits of that program with the incoming U.S. administration?
Yeah.
Even with the president-elect being skeptical about it before.
Yeah. And then you've got Elon Musk, this big player in the tech world, totally backing the H-1B program.
Sees it as, vital for getting global talent, fueling that innovation.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The H-1B program, medical tourism, even that whole Starlink situation, they all kind of touch on this idea of global interconnectedness, this flow of people, services, tech across borders, this whole web of dependence.
Like a giant web where each strand represents like a different aspect of globalization. And when one strand is pulled, it creates these ripples throughout the entire system.
Exactly. And this interconnectedness, it has the potential for amazing benefits.
Yeah.
Economic growth, knowledge sharing, cultural exchange.
Right.
But it also creates vulnerabilities, dependencies.
So the challenge is, how do you use the good parts of globalization without all the risk? It requires some careful planning, open communication, and a willingness to adapt to this constantly changing world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And talking about adapting to change, remember that story about certain Garmin devices being illegal in India
Yeah.
because of their satellite communication stuff?
Yeah, my hiking watch being potentially illegal definitely got my attention.
Well, this little regulation is actually connected to the bigger picture we've been talking about, right?
Mm.
Data security and national sovereignty.
Right.
India is basically saying we get to decide what tech works within our borders and what data it sends out.
It's a good reminder that even small regulations can have these big implications. They reflect a country's priorities, how they choose to deal with all this tech and globalization stuff.
Makes you wonder what other small regulations are out there in different countries, reflecting some larger strategy, geopolitical or economic. It's like this secret language of power and influence just waiting to be decoded. Pretty cool when you think about it.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. We began with just a bunch of headlines, but by connecting the dots, we found this network of themes and trends that are shaping India's role in the world.
It really shows how powerful critical thinking is, how important it is to look beyond the surface, to understand what's really happening. It's not just about knowing the facts, but understanding what they mean and how they connect to the bigger picture.
And it's a great reminder that the world is complex and constantly changing, full of surprises and challenges. But if we stay informed, ask questions, and have thoughtful discussions, we can start to understand and navigate through it all. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into India's news. We've covered a lot, from international relations and tech regulations to health concerns, even a little bit of cricket drama. It's been quite the journey.
It really has. We really got into those stories and found some fascinating connections.
For sure. We started with just those headlines, but by connecting those dots, we've revealed some big themes shaping India's place on the world stage.
It's been interesting to see how India is asserting itself globally,
Yeah.
navigating those complex relationships with big powers like the US and China,
Right.
but also setting their own rules for tech and data.
Yeah, those data protection regulations were something else. Seems like India is serious about digital sovereignty.
It's a strong reminder that things are changing fast in the digital world, and countries are figuring out how to balance innovation with, keeping control in this new era.
And we can't forget the human side of all this. The visa situation with Bangladesh, the effect on medical tourism, these headlines, they represent real consequences for people.
Yep.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture, but it's important to remember the real-world impact of these events.
It really emphasizes how connected our world is and how things happening far away can have these ripple effects that cross borders, even across seemingly unrelated sectors.
So if we had to sum it all up for our listeners, what would be the one key takeaway? What should they be thinking about as they go about their day?
I'd say pay attention to those smaller stories,
Uh-huh.
the ones that don't always make the front page.
Okay.
They can reveal these larger trends and tensions that are quietly shaping our world.
I like that. Looking for those hidden connections, the patterns underneath it all, like being a detective, piecing together those clues to get the bigger picture.
Exactly. And another key takeaway, embrace the complexity. The world isn't just black and white. There's so many perspectives, different interests, and often, those unintended consequences.
So instead of looking for simple answers, maybe we should be asking better questions.
Yep.
Questions that challenge what we think we know and help us make sense of this really intricate web of global forces.
Well said. Curiosity, thinking critically, being willing to learn. Those are the tools we need to understand the world.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive has been a really fascinating journey,
It has.
and I think our listeners have a lot to consider now.
As always, there's always more to learn. And that's what makes exploring these topics so great.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and keep those perspectives open.